if you have one of those, you need to melt it down. You need to do anything else with it other than use it when you're playing golf.
Take it to the scrapyard.
All right, everybody. How you living? Noputtsgiven. We are back. Tony Covey, Chris Nickel, and
Special guest,
the one, the only Lou Statsman, lives in an echo chamber of numbers, I hear. A sad, lonely existence, apparently.
Yeah.
Lou.
It's good to see you guys. Thanks for having me on today.
Absolutely. Tony, what's with the red and green? It's not Christmas.
I just kind of, we have transitioned. Like even the Halloween stuff is gone. Thanksgiving, I'm just trying to stay one step ahead. Easter stuff comes out like December 20th.
When can you start listening to holiday music? I call it Christmas music.
Never. Strictly forbidden. I used to work with a guy who was like, he was an early Christmas music guy, and he would start it with like Dominic the Donkey, which I think loosely qualifies as Christmas music, but that would start like October.
Yeah.
No good.
That is a smidge early.
Yeah.
You got stats on that?
I was gonna say,
we could get some though. We can run. I know somebody who used to work at a music streaming service, so we could get some numbers on that.
There we go. And then I'd have to slide into your DMs and tell you how wrong you are, but
that'd be great. Join the club.
Feel the right time to start the music is.
Join the club. Always entertaining in the DMs.
Oh my gosh. So just for people that don't know or maybe aren't familiar with you, Lou, who the hell are you?
I am a numbers guy. So I've been working in analytics before they called it analytics. And I started dabbling in golf about maybe just a little over 4 years ago now. And I had some golf data and I thought I could do some pretty cool stuff with it. And I decided to create a blog. And so if you follow me on Twitter, you'll see GolfStat Pro in parentheses. And the story, I don't think I've ever told this. So this would be a first time. So the story behind that is when I decided I was going to create a blog around golf stats, which is extremely exciting. Like it's riveting for so many people. I had to come up with a domain name. Like, what am I going to pick? And at the time, my daughter was 8 years old. So we had a whole list of stuff and she came up with GolfStat Pro. That was her idea. I was like, that's pretty good. I'm going to go with that. And I was on Twitter at the time, but I didn't use Twitter at all. Zero. And somebody told me, you really need to go into social media, start tweeting some stuff out there. You've done a couple of neat things already. People are going to be interested. And I didn't really understand how Twitter worked at all. I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Like, what do you mean? Like, I'm going to go on there and who am I going to talk to? They're like, no, you just put it out there and people will see it. You can comment. And so I started, and not too long after, my daughter's like, well, are you the GolfStat Pro on Twitter? And I was like, no, I just have my name up there. You need to put GolfStat Pro because then people will know who you are at that point. And so I did. And that's why it's been there ever since. And it'll probably never leave. It'll always be there. So that's the story behind the moniker and where it came from.
And what we can take from that is that an 8-year-old girl knows more about social media than maybe all of us, right?
Probably. Yeah. More than likely. I think all the kids do these days. So yeah, more than likely. And so I started down this path and created this blog and started, meeting people. And it's just taken me in some crazy places over the last 4 years. And now I work for Arccos. I'm an assistant coach for the Princeton men's golf team, which is near where I live. Ambassador for Puttview Books, and I work with a number of elite players. Give some data to a couple of tour coaches. It's crazy. Like I pinch myself every day that I get to do this for, a side hustle. So it's been awesome and so much fun.
You also drive an Uber on the weekends. Seems like the one job you don't have.
Yeah, I don't drive an Uber. I'm a Lyft guy. Yeah, on the weekends. Yeah, but yeah, it's been awesome. It's been a lot of fun, and can't wait to see where it continues to go.
You mentioned you worked with elite players. One of them is Austin Greaser.
Correct.
The Masters, among other significant tournaments last season.
Yes.
What kind of stuff do you do with Austin and your other elite players? Like, what is your actual function? What is your role? What are you giving them?
Yeah, all of them are a little bit different. So some of them we do some stats review, and then some of them, or most of them, we prep for tournaments. So we will go through tournaments and we will pick out lines off the tee. But everything that I do there is customized to them. So not everybody has the same dispersion. Everybody's a little bit differently. And if you really want to try to eke out everything you can, you want to try to understand a player's tendencies as well as you can. And so, a club like the Driver, you can have, you know, two different elite players, and you can just look on the PGA Tour and you can see some players are, they're they have a much larger dispersion than other players. And, when you find yourself on tighter holes, knowing exactly, or as exact as you can, knowing, how big of a window you need allows you to make the most appropriate decision. So, there's one player that I work with who needs probably about 69, 70 yards, somewhere in there. And there's another player that needs about 59. And so if we get to a hole that has, 64 yards between, out of bounds on the left and out of bounds on the right, they're playing at some, course with houses all around it down in Florida. One of those players, we're probably not going to hit driver, and one of them we would, because he has enough room based on how accurate he is with driver off the tee. So those are the kind of things I help them with, and we go through a lot of different exercises to understand what their dispersion is. I also help them with practice plans. I've put a lot of time and effort into learning as much as I can from people that are way smarter than me, skill acquisition, motor learning, and how we can learn most effectively. And I get to apply some of that with the players that I work with. So it's a mix of stuff, and it's a blast. It's a lot of fun. I mean, 99.99999% of all of their success is 100% is because of them. Like it's not because of anybody else other than them. And being around these players, it's fascinating to see how much drive they have and how committed they are to getting better and being as good as they can. And the thing that I've noticed that's common amongst all of these players is they're all extremely open-minded for the most part, right? None of them are like, nope, none of them have blinders on.
Do none of these guys have Twitter accounts? None of them.
Do any of them?
Some of them do. But yeah, that's a good. So they're always open to learning, right? They're always trying to learn more, and wherever that happens to be, if it can help to make them better, they're going to try to get there. Now, I think they've all done a pretty good job at having a filter of, they're not going to listen to, every YouTube video out there and every hot tip to make your game better. They're good at filtering, what's good and what's bad. But they're open to learning, and it's a pretty common trait among the players I've been exposed to.
So with that, Lou, you talk about how dedicated they are. Obviously, a lot of players you work with are already very good, if not great golfers from a skill standpoint. What are the biggest gaps in their learning, or, where you can bring a lot of value to them? Because kind of that, you don't know what you don't know part of it. What is it, where you really get those aha kind of light bulb moments from these players that are, again, they're already very, very good and accomplished players in many cases, but where they go, oh man, I've never thought about it that way, or, yeah, didn't even think to look at it in that manner.
I would say, without question, it's been the mental side of the game. So, I got to know a gentleman. His name is Dr. Izzy Justice, and he's a sports neuroscientist, and he works with athletes across many sports, from golf to NASCAR and everything in between. Uh, Fascinating guy, incredibly smart guy, and incredibly accomplished guy. And through getting to know him, I started to be exposed a little bit more to what he does, helping athletes perform at their peak. And I've read probably, dozen of sports psychology books out there. And I don't want this to sound the wrong way, but I was never a fan of them. I always felt like they were, as a numbers person, I always felt like they were, lacking in a lot of the detail that I would have wanted to understand. And I would want to know a little bit more of the, what's going on? Why is it going on? What can I do about it? Why do those things work? Instead of just, they control your emotions, let it go, forget about it. Some of the basic stuff. And I don't mean to trivialize what anyone's put out there, and I don't want it to sound the wrong way, but I always walked away from those books going, I'm not really sure exactly precisely what you want me to do. And so when I learned a little bit more about what Dr. Justice does, he has a certification program for coaches to go through. And I didn't walk out of that with a PhD in neuroscience by any stretch, but I walked out of that with a really good understanding of how our brain is working from a neuroscience perspective and what's going on when we get anxious, nervous, upset, mad, angry, disappointed, frustrated, pick the word, what's going on, why that's happening, what it impacts, and then what you can do about it. And so of all the things that I've worked with players, I give them, what I've learned. I'm regurgitating what I've learned from him through his process. That is the thing that they've all told me has been probably the most effective. So that's the number one thing. It's a really cool area, and it's a conversation I always enjoy having with players.
What's an example of that? Like something like there's a, what would the movie trailer kind of look like for that course? Or can you give me an example where, Tony just snap hooks, 2 balls in a row off the TOB and he's a little frustrated with himself. And what would what might you say to him? What could you say? Hey, I want to sit down and work with you for 30 seconds. Here's something I could maybe help you with.
Yeah. No. So I'll try to give you the 2-minute view of that. It's a little bit more than 2 minutes. It's not much more, but it's a little bit more than 2 minutes. Basically, your brain is a big ball of electricity, right? And your ability to hit a golf shot exists in your brain. It does not exist in your muscles. There's no such thing as muscle memory. The muscles have no ability to retain or store information. The muscles are executing the instructions that the brain is providing to them. And so, because your brain is a big ball of electricity, there's frequencies. There's high frequency, low frequency. High frequency, think of it like a seismograph, right? When there's an earthquake going on, it looks like this. Low frequency, there's no earthquake. It's just kind of flat line. There's nothing there.
I know that one really well.
Yeah. And so what happens when you get to high frequency, when you get mad, angry, upset, anxious, nervous, scared, what happens when you get to high frequency is it does a couple of things. It impacts your ability to deliver those instructions effectively. And first thing that it does is it messes up the sequencing potentially of those instructions and how they get delivered. And so we think of, as golfers, we think of sequencing in terms of golf, sequencing of our swing and the kinetic sequence, if you're familiar with what that is. Well, these instructions that are going from your brain to your muscles have to go and get executed and fire your muscles in a certain order. And when you get to high frequency, those instructions, which are traveling down neural pathways, think of those like roads that are going throughout your body. Those instructions, when you're in high frequency, they're going to run into traffic. There's a lot of traffic on those roads. And so let's say, and this is oversimplifying, let's say the bit of information that needs to get to your left wrist so that at impact, your left wrist is 1 degree of flexion at impact. It gets there a little bit late because there's a huge traffic jam, in your left arm. and it's at 1 degree of extension at impact because it
Gonna
got
be
it.
next time.
Yep.
Traffic jam in my
Well,
life,
it's
though.
not an excuse. It's true. That's what's going on. And so if it gets there a little bit late, you're not going to be in 1 degree of flexion, and that throws the face way off and you hit a bad shot. So when you see golfers on TV that get into really high stress situations and their swings start to look funky, that is a contributing factor. The instructions are showing up out of order, out of sequence. Things are happening out of order, out of sequence, which is why their swing looks funny. The second thing that it does when you get into high frequency is it impacts your ability to feel force. So feeling force would be, if you've ever gotten nervous and your arms start to feel heavy, your hands start to feel heavy, like that is your brain having a tough time feeling force. And so how that translates to golf, I'm sure you both have done this. You have a wedge in your hand. It's a perfect number for that wedge. There's no wind. It's flat. No, you're not uphill or downhill. You hit it exactly how you want on the button, flight it exactly how you want. And as soon as it leaves the club, you're like, be close, like get in the hole, like, and it drops out of the sky 25 yards short, or it goes 25 yards long. And you're like, I have no idea. It's one of those where you legitimately like, I have no idea what just happened. What just happened? Well, if you are at all high frequency, your ability to feel force can be impacted. So let's say you typically swing your wedge 80 miles per hour. You may have swung at 85. You may have swung at 75. It felt to you like it was exactly 80 because your force is off a little bit. Putting also happens in putting when you get into high stress situations. You'll see a player in a high stress situation with a 25 footer and they hit it 12 feet by, or they leave it 8 feet short. And they're like, what just happened? Your ability to feel force gets impacted. And the last thing that it does when you get to high frequency, when those roads get clogged up with traffic, the last thing that it does is it impacts your ability to hold a target. So golf is very different than most every other sport in that you're not typically looking at the target in golf unless it's a close putt or if you happen to be a heads up putter. Other than that, you take one last look and then you're looking down. As soon as you look down, your brain has to have the ability to hold that target. It's kind of like shooting free throws with your eyes closed, right? You step up, you dribble a few times, you look up, you close your eyes. You have to remember where that is. Well, that gets a lot tougher when you get to high frequency. So when you see players in high pressure situations that hit these, maybe a big block or a big pull, a contributing factor to that can be that they lost where the target was. They looked down and their brain shifted the target 7, 8, 9, 10 yards right. And all that's happening is their body is reacting to where that target, to where it now thinks the target is, which is why they hit some of those shots. So that was probably more than 2 minutes, but that's in a nutshell what's going on. And the entire objective of, trying to tackle the mental game when you're golfing is getting to low frequency and staying at low frequency. That's the entire objective. Low frequency is where you're going to find the zone. If you ask any player that's ever been have you ever been in the zone playing golf, playing any sport? Has it ever happened?
Yeah,
like twice.
absolutely.
Like twice.
What did it feel like?
Felt like nothing. Felt like nothing.
Effortless.
Like it was just
Total control.
Like cruise control.
Yeah. What else?
Slow.
Such a common answer. It felt really slow. I was in control. It was easy. I was unconscious. Well, that's when you're in low frequency, you have alpha and theta brainwaves. That's predominantly what it will be. And that feeling is what you will get when you have alpha and theta brainwaves. And so the entire objective of the mental game is trying to get to that state. Now, this does not guarantee you're going to hit a good shot. It just kind of tips the scales in your favor. And when you're high frequency, that doesn't guarantee you're going to hit a bad shot. It just kind of tips the scales that way. So the entire objective is to try to stay low frequency. There's a lot of different things you can do, but that's when I first learned this and first was exposed to this. And I'm going through it really, really fast. For the first time, the light bulb clicked and I was like, okay, I get it now. Like that's what's going on. That's what's going to happen. Here's what you can do about it. And here's why those things work. And the answer to why those things work is because they lower your brainwave frequency. which is the entire objective of what we're trying to do.
So how do you, I mean, this is fascinating. We've gone down a little
this
bit
is
of a
really
rabbit hole
cool
here, but
yeah, this is,
I got how do you clear the traffic jam?
So there's a lot of things you can do. So you're breathing, like you breathe in your pre-shot routine, right? You take a deep breath. Why do you do that?
calm the
Everybody
central nervous
does.
system.
I don't know that I do.
I don't
Well,
think
That's
most people do. Most people take some kind of deep breath. Well, if we had you hooked up to an EEG machine to measure your brainwave frequency, and you took a deep breath, you would see your brainwave frequencies start to come down. So that's one thing that you can do, and you can, you can magnify that through some other techniques. I won't share those publicly. I'll tell you guys after. But just taking a deep breath, a really slow, controlled deep breath, is going to lower your brainwave frequency. Focusing on something really intently is going to lower your brainwave frequency. So right now, I'm looking at a web camera that's right from here. Yeah, or I'll go right over here. I have a picture. I have a whiteboard that's over here on my wall right behind. And there's two different kinds of focus. There's macro focus and micro focus. And macro focus is just, I'm just kind of noticing things around me. There's a whiteboard there. It's got some words on it. It's red letters. There's some green on there. Kind of looks like your shirt and your hat. And that's just general macro focus. Micro is starting to get to details where I'd go, okay, there's a whiteboard over there and it has a black frame around it. And that black frame, it has indentations as the frame is going away from the whiteboard. And the first kind of reveal looks like it's more rounded. And then the second one, it's squared off, and about a foot from the top, there's like a small little tiny nick right there. And inside that nick, there's a small little white spot, and it almost looked like a nail hole. So all I'm doing is looking at detail and then finding details and more details and details about the details. And simply by doing that, going through that exercise, I'm lowering brainwave frequency. So if you're walking down the fairway and you can look up at the clouds, and macro focus would be, oh, there's a bunch of clouds in the sky. Micro focus would be, hey, there's a cloud. Oh, look at that one. It looks like Snoopy. And that one, looks like my car. It looks like the first car I had when I was a kid. Look at that. Oh, there's like an exhaust coming out. And you're finding all these details about the clouds, or you're looking at a tree and you're looking at a specific part of the tree and maybe a branch, and then focusing in on some twigs and some leaves. And simply the act of doing those things is going to lower your brainwave frequency. And you can do that through all of your senses. So by really engaging all of your senses, you can lower your brainwave frequency. So if you were to take a drink of Gatorade, instead of just taking a drink of Gatorade, what you could do is take a drink of Gatorade, put it in your mouth, kind of swish it around a little bit like you are a wine taster, a sommelier, and notice all the hints of, your
blue.
Your blue Gatorade. Yeah, I noticed blue,
raspberry.
Yeah. Oh, there's some aftertaste. Yeah, there's a chemical. But noticing that and noticing the texture and the temperature and how the temperature feels and how it changes as it's in your mouth, all of that and focusing on that is going to accomplish our primary objective, which is lowering your brainwave frequency. That's the goal of all of this, is to lower brainwave frequency. So again, I'm going through this so fast and relatively high level, but that's kind of the gist of it. And that part has been fascinating to me, and to see it in play and to see how it has helped myself and how it helps other players has been awesome. It's been a lot of fun.
This is wild. Absolutely wild. Again, not a direction I thought we were going to go down, but that's fine. Yeah. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about, one of the jobs, I think you have like 30 jobs, if my count's correct. We talked about at the beginning, you work for Arccos. You are privy to what is at this point got to be a massive, massive data set. How many shots in the Arccos database, give or take?
Over 570 million.
Rounding. Okay.
Yeah. To put that in perspective, ShotLink is what the PGA Tour has used since 2004. Every shot basically in the PGA Tour for the events they use it at is like 23 million, 24 million. And Arccos has 570 million.
It's insane.
It's crazy. Yeah.
So based on, and I know you spend a lot of time in that database poking around, I want you to give us some things that everyday golfers, again, according to the data, based on the data, not what I feel, what Chris feels. What things should golfers just stop doing? So what does the data suggest that we need to just?
There's a lot. Like, we'll start off with an obvious one: 3-wood, dropping down to 3-wood for accuracy. Right? People are typically, they're going to be, for most players, are between 1% and 3% more accurate with 3-wood compared to their driver. And by that, I just simply mean they hit about 1% to 3% more fairways. Their dispersion, so if you look at their entire shot pattern, their 3-wood is going to look almost exactly the same as their driver.
Just shorter.
Which means your worst shot with 3-wood is going to be about as bad as your worst shot with driver. Just going to be a little bit shorter. So players dropping down to 3-wood to gain accuracy that's just not how it works. It is marginal. And the very, very marginal gain that you get in accuracy is more than offset by the fact that you are pretty much guaranteed to be shorter than your driver. Like, if you hit 100 shots with driver and 100 with 3-wood, your drivers are going to be longer. Like, your longest 3-wood is probably going to go longer than your shortest driver, but overall, you're going to be shorter overall. Now, the only time you should really, really put it into play is if you can, if you're hitting 3-wood to remove, reaching something. That's really about the only time.
So when you need to hit it shorter, not when you need to hit it straighter.
Exactly. Yeah. If you really need to hit it straighter because it's a crazy tight hole, you need to be dropping down multiple clubs.
That was going to be my question: is, okay, if it is that type of situation, because it's a common fallacy we hear all the time, right? Is,
right.
Hey, you might want one of these clubs because those tighter par 4s and whatever. Okay, if I'm going to drop from driver, what do I need to drop to see a significant benefit in terms of accuracy?
Mini driver.
Like 7-iron? Like, do I need to go down?
It depends on the situation. And this is why, it's extremely helpful to know what your dispersion is. So in Every Shot Counts, Mark Brody, he kind of touched on the subject, and, it depends on the circumstances. There's a lot of things that impact this, but roughly, us amateurs, we only want to hit about 5% of our shots out of bounds, like into penalty situations. And if you're hitting more than that, I mean, obviously we want less than that, but if you're hitting more than that, then you are not being optimal. So when you have a situation where you have, out of bounds on both sides and you have to fit it into a window, you have to know how big your window is. And everybody has different windows. Amateur, typical 10, 12 handicap probably needs 75 to 90 yards, depending on the player, somewhere in that range. That's why it's important to know what yours is. And what you would do is if you have, let's say you have 55 yards of room between OB, you're playing some tight course in Florida, you need to drop down to the club where 95% of your shots are going to stay in play. We want that to be the longest club in your bag, but we want it to be 95% are going to be in play. So knowing that,
so 9-iron, Chris.
Yep. Yeah, that solves it. That solves it. I can play a lot of par 4s, 9-iron wedge too, but
wedge. But
yeah, I have those shots too.
Yeah. Or what else you got, Lou? So
I like that one.
Fairway, not for accuracy.
Yeah, fairway, not for accuracy. Playing. This is a pet peeve. I'm sliding in one of my pet peeves here. This was really shocking to me. So one of the things that I had looked at was where people are playing from. What tees are you playing? And then because I have all their data, I know how far they hit the ball. And it is shocking to me how many, players are typical players. Typical male amateur hits it, 219, somewhere right around there, give or take.
I feel that's wrong.
Do you feel it in your gut?
Down deep.
Then it's probably right.
Damn it.
Yeah, it's probably right.
I think Tony's having one of those construction issues in his arm again. His feels are off.
Yeah,
they're way off.
Yep.
So it's shocking to me how many players are playing at 66, 67, 6,800 yards. It's just they would have, in my opinion, like USGA and PGA of America came out with the Tee It Forward campaign, 10 years ago, 11 years ago. And I don't have it in front of me, but I'm pretty sure if you hit it, 225, you should be playing a golf course between 5,800 and 6,000 yards is what they suggest. And that aligns pretty good with, right about where it should be. That's going to give you, plenty of opportunity to hit greens. You're going to hit a mix of clubs. It's a good yardage for you for somebody that hits it 220, 225. Playing it at 6,700, you're going to be hitting driver 3-wood, driver 5-wood, driver your longest hybrid on most of the par fours. And you're going to be hitting a really long club on many of the par threes as well. So that's a little bit of a pet peeve for me. And I think people need to stop doing that, and they'll have more fun if they do that.
Nonsense.
How would somebody figure out like you said, those numbers USGA has, et cetera? Are there any other, kind of quick calculations or tips, kind of like, hey, if my average driver length is, if somebody does have Arccos or another stat tracking platform where they can look and see, yep, my average driver is 245. Okay, I should be playing from.
Yeah, the USGA Tee It Forward campaign, which you can Google, USGA Tee It Forward. The guidelines there are great. From what I've looked at with, a distribution of what kind of approach shots people would have if they played, a golf course of that length. And I've looked at a number of golf courses, that play in the 5,800 to 6,000 yard range. And then I've looked at, tee shot length of players and what that would leave approach shot wise. And it aligns really closely with what you would see a tour pro would have, playing. So, those guidelines are great. I would suggest those. There's a guy on Twitter. His name's Keith Cook. He has something pinned to his page where some people will say like 5-iron carry distance times 36, but that's probably way too aggressive. And he worked through it and it was really good. I want to say it was maybe 5-iron carry distance times like 33 or 34 for most rounds. Maybe it was, that times 35 if it's a tournament round. But it was well thought out, well done, and it was pretty good guidelines. And it ends up aligning pretty close to what you're going to see from USGA.
Yeah, that works. The 5-iron works. Yeah. I like that one. That was probably pretty close.
I was hoping to find it quickly, but it looks like he has a different pinned tweet at the moment. So
he does? Yeah, then we probably won't find it quickly. He had a pin forever. Did you feel that was right in your gut, Tony?
Did that feel good,
do we need to address that in some manner?
Yeah, well, I guess I'll accept that answer.
Okay. All right. That's good. All right. Next. So I had a smorgasbord of stuff that I wanted to maybe talk about, but here's one that I'm going to answer it a couple of different ways. This is around the green. I started to look at around the green performance, and I looked at every skill level. So I bucketed players by what their skill level was, by what their index was. And then within that group of players, so let's say I was looking at all the scratch players. Within that group of scratch players, I looked at the players that had the best short game and the players that had the worst short game. And I wanted to see, if there were things that jumped out, bubbled up based on what they were doing and how they were doing it. This was fascinating. So I don't know if this necessarily tells you what people should stop doing. Part of it does, but part of it is just fascinating to me. The best short game players of good golfers, so single digit index or better is what I'm going to say a good golfer is. the best short game players used a much wider variety of clubs.
Really?
So
Around
much
the green?
wider variety of clubs.
I would have actually guessed the opposite.
And the worst short game players, they typically were grabbing their 56 or their 60. Like they were grabbing 2 clubs, like, and that's all that they did. They used the same club. And I even looked at it where I was looking and narrowing it down to situations where they were long sided, right? Where they had the ball was 2 yards off the green and the pin was all the way across the green. So they had 20-yard shot and 18 yards of green to work with. And they're just grabbing their 60 all the time.
60,
like every
60,
time.
60.
60, 60, 60, 60 all the time. But
Must have
when I looked at the bad players, and by bad players, I mean 15 index and above, it was the opposite. The best short game players of the bad players, they typically only used a couple of clubs. The worst short game players of the high index players, they used a wide variety of clubs. They were trying to, to me, it almost, the way I would describe it is they were probably trying to hit a lot of different shots that they might not have. It was amazing to me. So what I would say stop doing is, if you're a good player, stop grabbing your 60 for every shot around the green. And if you are a higher index player, stop trying to hit bump and runs with your hybrid, out of the rough. Stick with a couple of simple shots. And I don't have it in front of me, but I want to say with the higher index players, the number of double chip situations where they would hit a shot and not hit the green was orders of magnitude more than the better short game players for the high index players that were, 56. I'm going to take this 56 and I'm going to put it on the green. And I know how to hit that shot, and I can hit a couple of shots with it, and I'm just going to get it on the green. So I'm putting next. So that was a really cool one to go through and kind of see what was going on there. How does your gut feel about that?
That sounds right.
My gut's confused because it's like, yeah, I mean, it makes sense in a sense, like, now what if I want to go from being a worse golfer to becoming a better golfer? It's almost like, hey, get good at one or two shots around the green. And then once you get capacity to execute those, start adding a third one, but maybe not a third, fourth, and fifth, but maybe like, okay, I'm going to add a bump and run shot or a different type of shot, or I'm going to add one more and then kind of see how that goes. But I'm not just going to go from, hey, I'm going to use my 56 or 60 to I'm going to use 6 different clubs around the green.
Yeah, it's a great way to put it. And I don't, I wish I had, I don't know that I'd be able to get there, but understanding that progression, if I had unlimited time and resources and didn't have to drive Uber on the weekends, I would probably dive into that one. Lyft. Yeah. Sorry. Lyft. But that'd be cool to understand the progression for players. So stop only using one club if you're a good player, and stop trying to hit every shot in the bag if you're a higher index player.
Tony, stop it. Stop it, Tony.
I will not.
I'm learning a lot here, Tony. I want to hear this one.
This is so typical. And you've heard this a million times before, but amateurs typically need to take more club. They are coming up short so much.
I definitely feel you're wrong there.
I feel I'm wrong there too. So I would tell people that, there isn't many situations where a middle of the green or slightly past middle of the green distance number for most players is going to, not be a good distance number for them. When I look at front pins, front pins are hard, even PJ Tour players to front pins don't do as well. unless there's a body of water in front of it, right? If there's a body of water in front of it and there's a huge penalty for coming up short, then they're blowing it past the hole.
A motivating factor.
Very motivating factor. But if there's not a body of water in front of it, even tour players struggle to front pins to get it there. But amateur players, we are really bad to front pins. We come up short so much. So taking a little bit more club is certainly very advisable. You were going to ask me something before.
This seems obvious too, and yet I know people cannot force themselves to do it. Just the traffic jams, I guess.
That plus it's just, how far do you hit your 7-iron? Oh, I hit it 150. Well, you hit it 150 like, 25% of the time. 75% of the time, it's shorter than 150.
If the flag is 155 and it's right on the front of the green, that's still an 8-iron, right? Because that's 155. What else would I hit there?
But you even have, and I totally concede that ego's probably, the 90% of it where, yes, I hit my 7-iron 175 once in the launch monitor, whatever. Therefore,
that's the new average, man.
Now my new 7-iron.
I feel that's how averages work.
That's how I feel an average should work, is whatever I remember as the best. But what about players that are willing to say, hey, I don't care. I'll put ego aside, whatever the case is, but they still don't have a great way to understand what that clubbing up is like. Well, shit, yeah, I'd hit a 6-iron there. I don't care if it's 6-iron or 7-iron, but I don't know when I should do that. Where let's say it is that 150 and here at altitude in Colorado. Yeah, I can get pitching wedge to 150, but okay, I should probably be hitting 9-iron, maybe even 8-iron in some situations to a 150 pin. How do you get somebody to transition to that if they're willing to put that ego aside? Say, I don't care what club it is.
If I'm playing with them and they're my partner, I lie to them. I give them the wrong yardage. I tell them I add yardage every single time. And they're like, really? Is that it looks the 150s right here? We're staring at it. You just told me it's 164.
Yeah, must be a little back. Pins back.
Yeah, pins all the way in the back. You got to hit that. So yeah, when people talk about dispersion with golf, there's more than just east-west. There's more than just side-to-side dispersion. There's north-south, and north-south is bigger than east-west. So it's typically, a fair amount bigger. And I don't have it in front of me, but I want to say for a 10 handicap from 125 yards in the fairway, the one standard deviation north-south was maybe 14 yards, 15 yards, something like that. It's pretty big. And you're going to want to have, a target at least one standard deviation away from the edge of the green. And so if you have a standard deviation of 14 yards from,
you want people to do math. I see.
I see where this is going.
I thought there was going to be no math. Yeah. So you would want your target to be at least 14 yards on the green. There's so many factors that come into play here, but that typically means there's very, very, very few circumstances where you're not going to be pretty deep onto a green if you're the typical amateur player. So it's just, it's just how it is. Just
check your bell curves, dummy.
Check your bell curves. Yeah. Check your bell curves. One standard deviation is what, 64% roughly?
Yeah, it's 68. Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, about that. 2 is about 95.
Yep. Yeah, so there you go. So
I feel 64 is close enough.
I feel 6. I'm going to round up to 68. Because I like it. Yeah. I like it. All right, I'm going to ask one more question, Tony, and you can ask whatever questions you have. I need this in my life, Lou. I need this in my life where people have, if people are honest about keeping an index, you should shoot your index, call it once every 4, once every 5 times. Again, taking into account rating, slope, differential, whatever. Okay, that's great. But we all know the percentage chance of somebody shooting under their handicap by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 strokes increases rapidly based on whether or not it's a member guest, right?
Yeah, so, this is true, very true.
So I want a t-shirt or something that has like a chart of like just the actual mathematical probability of shooting your handicap, and then like 1, 2, 3, like all the way through like 10 strokes better. So I could just like hand those out at a member guest and be like, wow, you just did something that mathematically, that was a 1 in 84,312.
This is brilliant, Chris. We need to find an
this
apparel sponsor who's going to make us the member guest polo.
Yeah, the member guest, and it'll be powered by Lou Stagner. And
love it.
Can we get that information? Can you do that? Like what the
the
likelihood is?
There's a really good it's an old website. It's been up there forever, but Pope of Slope. Dean, I forget his life. He was USGA guy who, was part of the handicap system. Pope of Slope. And he has a chart up there, the odds of shooting an exceptional tournament score. And they're pretty high, depending on, for somebody to shoot net 10 under, that doesn't happen too often. And he has a good chart up there on that. So yeah,
funny because I see it happen about 20 times a summer. It's amazing.
This isn't a case of I feel you're wrong, Lou. I know you're wrong about this.
I know you're wrong.
Time and time again.
Yes.
Chris and I got rolled one year.
Oh. Yeah, we got rolled by people that are, people that are, trying to put their kids through college on a pro shop credit that have no problem shooting net 10 under routinely on the member guest circuit. I want to know, so when I shoot, I go to the member guest and I shoot 3 over my hand, go, hey, I was still 82nd percentile. 81 other people wouldn't have done as good as I did. That's pretty good.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, so you can just Google it, Pope of Slope, odds of shooting an exceptional tournament score, and you'll see a chart up there, and it walks you through by handicap level and then by how many net under you are. It's
going to be like 98%, right? Like
it's spot on.
That my life's complete now.
I'm I'll be your first customer for that shirt. Yeah. I'll probably wear that shirt every day. I won't just wait for the member guest. I'll wear it out every day.
Good. Right? So good.
It's a good idea.
So Lou, what I wanted to ask, again, based on the data, not what I feel, not what you feel, not what anybody feels, what Arccos data tells us.
Yeah.
Is there a club or even clubs that the data suggests, whether it's the loft or a type of club, whatever you got, this club should not be in your bag.
Get rid of it.
To math.
You talking about generally or for specific players?
Well, you tell me. You're the guest. Answer it any way you want.
I wish I could. I don't know that I've ever looked at, should you rip this club out of your bag? I don't know that I've ever looked at that. If I had to guess, I would, based on some of the things I've seen, there's a lot of players that hit a lot of tee shots out of bounds with their driver. And they hit it all over the map. And so there would be, for higher handicap players, like I almost think that for some players, depending on who they are, there should be this progression. Chris, you kind of talked about a progression of the short game and how you should tackle it and how it should get better. I almost wonder for some higher handicaps if there should be a progression to get down to the driver. So that's one that really jumps out at me. 60-degree wedge for high handicap players, that's typically not a good combo. Like,
what about a 64? Like
a 64.
What if I just go up more? Yeah, is that better?
More better.
More loft equals more better. Yeah, the 64 is going to be even worse. It's amazing. There are people that have those in play. So in Arccos, we don't just track the shots. We know what club you have, and I was astounded at the number of 64-degree wedges that live in this world. I've seen like 1 or 2 in the wild in all my years, and I was blown away by the thousands and thousands of people that have 64-degree wedge in their bag. If you have one of those, you need to melt it down. You need to do anything else with it other than use it when you're playing golf.
Take it to the scrapyard. That's what I was looking for. A wedge you shouldn't have in play.
Yeah. 60-degree for high handicap is typically a bad idea. Like I've done a lot of work around short game performance at different skill levels. And for the higher handicap player, They are, even in situations where they're short-sighted, even in those situations, they are typically going to be better with a lower lofted club. Um, and 60 degree is not, if you're at 20 index,
Skip
from
it.
what I've seen, you probably shouldn't have a 60 in your bag. Not a good idea.
Do you ever see, Lou, where you get to like a certain swing speed, and because you're making me think about this in terms of eliminating certain clubs, uh, where somebody's like, "Hey, what club do you hit 150 yards?" And they're like, "Well, we have like 8 clubs. They hit 150 yards. They hit their 7-iron, their 6-iron, 5-iron, 4-iron, hybrid, thin driver, or if they hit, if they hit a 60 degree really thin, also
Yeah.
goes 150 yards." Where, like, again, back to the idea of a progression of like, hey, you don't need all 14 clubs until you can create meaningful separation at these particular distances, which tends to be more or less a swing speed conversation, but can also be a skill conversation too. Like, say, hey, play with these 7 clubs until you get down to a 16, and then think about adding so on and so forth.
Yeah, kind of on that topic. And Tony and I have had discussions around this in the past. He might remember them. Um, there are a lot of players that have gapping issues. So you said, you have 8 clubs that go 150. You said it as a
Yes.
joke. That's not too far off with some players, where they typically they're gapping. They don't really have gapping. It's so
They have
small.
overlapping.
It overlaps, or it equals. It equals. And the conversation that Tony and I had in the past was, people seem to be concerned by consistent gapping through the bag. And what we chatted about was, it would be interesting if you had tighter gapping in the shorter part of the bag, or the part of the bag where you're hitting most of your shots. Because typically for most players, your stock shot is going to have the tightest dispersion. So if you have to add a little bit to it, so hit it a little bit harder or hit it a little bit softer, your dispersion gets bigger. If you can just go at it with a stock swing and you're not trying to alter the distance, how far you hit it, that dispersion is going to be tighter. So there's a lot of players that have, especially in the wedge, they'll have wedge gaps that are 15 yards from, their 54 or 55 down to their gap wedge. There'll be a 15, 16-yard gap in yardage there. That's, what do you do when you get in between? Like, those are tough. Those are tough for every level of player. And especially for amateur players, but they're tough at every level. Like, anecdotally, you will 100%, you've heard, and you will continue to hear a player in the PGA Tour that has a good round, and they come off and they said, I had perfect numbers all day. Like, I had great numbers all day. And that means they didn't have to add anything. They didn't have to feather something in there. They're just hitting stock distance numbers all day long. And those are typically going to be a lot smaller. So, changing the bag around where maybe you gap it a little bit tighter. If you hit a ton of shots at your club between, 80 and 150, really tighten that up. And then, have a 150 club and a 170 club and a 195 club. I mean, we're so bad at that
chaos
distance anyway.
Just chaos.
I know.
But I like that. Because the concept of gapping, again, when you talk about fallacies, this idea of maybe 4 degrees, you play a 60, a 56, 52, and then maybe your opinion is 46, 42, 38, 30, but what if it were, your gaps were 10 yards or 8, 8, 10, 12, 15, 15, 20, whatever.
Right.
Got me thinking, Lou.
It's chaos, man.
It's chaos. It's
Yeah,
got me.
I think Tony was for it when we talked about it years ago.
No, and I still like the idea.
Yeah,
I did
really tightening up on that short end. Where, I mean, we've talked about it.
It makes sense
with everybody, right?
It
You
makes
miss greens, you miss hit shots as an amateur. You do all of these things, and you end up with an abundance, a disproportionate number of shots from, maybe it's, I would say probably ballparking it 140 and in.
Yeah,
right.
called pitching
And
wedge
so-
and under. But still, if you do that, it's like, okay, if I got a 5 wood, like let's take hole number 3, Tony, at your particular course, right? Tough par 3, uphill, like, okay, if I have a 5-wood and I need to hit that 5-wood, let's say I need to take a little off a 5-wood.
That's always fun.
I can just grip down half in it. And now it's 5, 6, 7, 8 yards as opposed to, I don't want to do that with my 50 degree or 52. Like, I'd rather just, again, feel good with that stock number. Yeah, I'd rather just hit it, but
avoid the traffic.
Yeah. So
yeah, you got me thinking now, Lou.
No. So yeah, on that topic. So my bag, my longest iron in the bag is a 5-iron. I play
your bag is amazing.
No. I have a different bag now. So
okay.
I have T300s in there, which are much stronger lofted. So my 5 is like a typical 4-iron. And then I go to a 7-wood.
Degrees, yeah.
Yeah, it's like 14 degree 5-iron. And then I go to a 7-wood after that. And I put a 7-wood in the bag, and I love it. And from that distance, like full swing 7-wood for me is like maybe 215, right? I meant like 290, with a butter cut. But it's like 215, but I can throttle that back really easily to like 180. And feel pretty comfortable with it. And I do that by choking down a lot. But our dispersion in that 200-yard range is huge. It's so gigantic. So if I have to, with a 7-wood, use that between like 185 and 215 by either, taking a normal grip with it or choking way down to get it to 185, I'm thinking about removing my 5-iron, letting my 7-wood serve the purpose of the 5-iron for the times that I do need it, and then tightening up the other end of my bag even more than it already is. So I'm thinking about doing that for next year. I'll let you know how it goes.
I can't wait till you have a 48, 50, 52, 56, and 60-degree wedges.
I will say that some of the smartest golfers I know, specifically myself and Lou, go directly from the 7-wood to the 5-iron. I think that's
2 out of 3. Yeah. That's 2 out of 3. I might. We'll have to check in, Tony. What are 2 more trips out? Maybe some of our golf fitting people, and we'll see. Maybe they'll convince me to.
How do you like the 7-wood?
It's a cheat code.
So
I tell
good,
everybody it's a cheat code.
I love it. I absolutely love it. I can't believe I waited this long to put it in the bag.
It's the closest I've ever experienced to a club that basically hits itself. I'm just like, you know what? I'm going to stand here. 7-wood, do your thing. And we'll be happy with the result.
I love it. Absolutely love
it's
it.
like the first couple times I try, I'm like, what's going on here? This is wild.
I feel like this could be a 9-part series. Lou part 1. I feel like we're going to get a lot of questions and feedback, and I hope that we do, because I want more questions. And man, like I said, this has given me an awful lot to think about. Went down to a couple different ways that maybe we didn't anticipate, but I always appreciate when I learn something new and different, and only way to do that is by talking to people smarter than yourself. So, Lou, thanks for coming on. Tony, I wasn't talking about you.
Right.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, guys.
But find us on the interwebs. Tony Covey, Chris Nickel, Lou Stagner. We'll put all the social handles on
our
there.
video guy will do that.
Yeah. Well, yep. But then questions. Let us know what your questions are for Lou. For any of us, post those on there. And until next time,
we have to have Lou back. This is
we want to know how you feel too. So that's important.
How do you feel?
Never mind and I'm not interested in your data.
I don't care about your data. How do you feel? All right, we're out. See ya.